And here we are. All right.
All right.
So I'm Paul Draper here with Full Circle Magic, interviewing the ever so talented and celebrated mentalist Marc Salem. I'm in Salt Lake City, Utah, and he's now near New York City, in just a few miles outside of New York.
I'm
And
delighted to be here. I'm glad you all asked me, and it's good to see you again, Paul.
good to see
Been a
you.
while.
The last time I saw Marc in person, I was on my personal lecture tour giving lectures to magic clubs, and I heard that he was lecturing in a theater in Wisconsin, and I drove about 5 hours up to see you lecture, and I even begged the local magic club to let me do a lecture up there so that I could support coming to see you. But that was added on just so I could come up and see you lecture. And when you were sitting in my audience for my lecture, I got to let you know, it terrified me.
You did a great job. Anybody who's listening who wants a lecturer, you're the man.
Oh, thank you. So let's get into a little bit. Can you give a brief summary for people that don't know who you are of who you are? What's your elevator pitch?
I don't have an elevator pitch. The problem with, I think, mentalism and even magic, and I don't really call this either one. We'll talk about that momentarily, but I think it's the last of the reality programming. It's the kind of show that you have to see to experience it. No matter what you hear about it, whatever the critics say, whatever people write, whatever people tell their friends. Now that's important. That's how I get my audiences. But it really is a show to be seen and experienced. I think that is what it's all about. I don't think mentalism, for example, transposes to television very well. I don't believe the news. Why would I believe this guy who's blathering about whatever he's blathering about? I mean, it's not the entertainment. Wallace McLuhan would talk about the medium is the message, and it's not a good medium for mentalism. Now, of course, to use those two words in one sentence will suddenly get all people. He said medium and mentalist in one sentence? Ooh.
How dare you?
But I feel that it's a fun theatrical experience. I think you came to the show also when we were at the Rep.
Yes, when you did
yes.
Mind Over Milwaukee.
Yes, Mind Over Milwaukee, and at the Milwaukee Rep, and yeah, it's true I lecture, and it's true I do the shows, and it's true I try to give the audience something they can't get on television, something they can't get anywhere but by live interaction, and I think that's a dying breed, of people who you could only be entertained with in person. I mean, you could see a comedian tell jokes on television. You could see a play on television. You could see a magic show on television. You may not be convinced that it's real any longer because of so much technique. So magic suffers from the same thing as mentalism, or what I call mind games. Suffers from. They both suffer from television itself as magic. And it's surrounded by its own mythologies.
There have been a few mentalists that have tried here in the States to have their own mentalism series. Alon New had one. Jerry McCambridge tried to have one, and succeeded. They had shows on television. What's his name? The Druid Master out of Keith Barry out of Ireland had one for a short time, and then Darren Brown has had considerable success, as did
but not the United States. You see, part of the reason, and I think everyone will agree that England is provincial. I've done many shows there. I did 8 shows in the West End, so I'm no stranger to England, but the point is, it's familiar, that it's your family, it's small. America isn't that small. They have always been wonderfully kind to me. Americans are not very kind to foreign performers. And plus, there's a tradition of magic on television there. Going now, the only person we had was Mark Wilson in the '50s. They had dozens of shows, and the Magic Circle. I mean, they put out a series of stamps, postage stamps. I mean, magic is a real art in England, and mentalism is considered a legitimate format. Now, it may come from the music halls. I mean, remember, that one of the classic Hitchcock films, certainly a classic book, was 39 Steps. And 39 Steps really involves a memory expert and kind of mentalism, and it's in Edinburgh, and I love Edinburgh. I've been there 8 different years.
For the Fringe Festival, or for?
Fringe, yes, and always wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And but I do think that we don't have many classics of literature that deal with mentalists in this country. Even the great mentalist mind would be a Sherlock Holmes more than it would be anything else. I mean, we have Columbo, so we have a schlumpy guy or two, and that's not even literary. So I do think it's it's a different kind of process even in television.
As the TV show,
as I say, magic has always been. Daniels had a wonderful show. This guy, what was his name? Well, certainly there were dozens and dozens of magic specials there. I mean, we had our Copperfield specials. We had, a few specials. But the point is, why don't they work in America? Because we don't. We're very, very cynical. But I also think we don't. I think that mentalism is also a kind of non-spectacular experience in the sense of seeing. Magic at least has spectacle. Mentalism, for the most part, is a verbal joust.
And if you're not here for the joust and you don't think there's a chance you're going to be intersected or interacted with, it loses that potency.
Well, as I said last week to a group that I was lecturing to, you can't practice mentalism in front of a mirror. And so they said, they never thought of that. By the same token, you can't, several times over my theatrical career, and I've had Broadway shows in West End and Sydney Opera House, they've wanted to say, well, let's try a director, because if we have a named director, it'll bring in more people. Well, first of all, the director then says, okay, at this point you move there. And I said, but what if the person I'm answering is there? And so the director realizes, oh, I'm useless here. And so I've never had a director in my life. And I've had the opportunity to interact and work with many, but none have directed me. Because I think part of the secret of mentalism is spontaneity, or apparent spontaneity. If a mentalist walks into a pool, if the stage goes dark and the mentalist walks into a pool of light, already to me, the illusion has been destroyed. Because that means there is a man behind the curtain. I do not want my audience to think there's a man behind the curtain. The illusion that I want to create is me and the audience. So it moved from a set that was designed very articulately and wonderfully, but I had 3 producers, and I didn't want that, to finally where it is now, which is basically bookcase, drawing room look, but more one that feels like a drawing room than is one. Because I think a good mentalist, your set disappears in 30 seconds.
Yeah, your set is very much you have invited people into your home.
Yeah.
There's a living room energy about it.
Right. Even the point of a rug is in my rider, because again, I want them to feel connected to the audience. You're invited up here. It's not me up here and you over there. We're together. We're sharing, and this is important information. People sometimes tune into this sort of thing, hoping, I reveal a secret. Well, these are the secrets. You see, tricks are not secrets. Tricks you could buy a dime a dozen, frankly, and it's irrelevant. What it is about is entertainment. Now, I don't want to be on the science page of the newspaper. I want 5-star reviews. I want to be on the entertainment section, which is why even the word mentalist has too much, I don't know what it is. I prefer a purveyor of mind games. But fine. Do I read thoughts? Yeah, don't we all? You're nodding your head. Yeah, I do. I happen to be a psychologist. I have 3 different PhDs in psychology. I happen to be one of the 3 dominant researchers in nonverbal communication. I've been used in major cases around the world, but not as a mentalist, as a professor. And people have to understand, there was one time where that was the most difficult thing for me to do, was this is the moment of mentalism, this is the moment of reality. I've simply removed that problem by, as soon as I step off of stage, there is no more mentalism. You'll never see me doing mentalism in my living room. You won't see me do it in a restaurant. As soon as I am off the stage, it's over. My show is over. I don't entertain anybody with pre-show work, and I don't entertain anybody with post-show work. They've paid for an hour and a half, intermission-free of entertainment, and that's what I give them.
So in some ways, your disclaimer is the proscenium.
Well, it is, plus the fact that I invite theater critics, plus that I make 3 disclaimers in my show. The first one is nothing that I do involves the supernatural or the occult, rather an application of known, if not necessarily fully understood, psychological and other techniques. And then the playbill also mentions conjuring, and at the end I also used Old Dungeon line, nothing that I do can't be done by any 12-year-old without 30 years of practice. Now, of course, newspapers being newspapers, news programs being news programs, will edit a sentence here and there and may either make it look like, I'm a comedian or I'm a psychic or supernatural, but most get it right. Most understand I'm an entertainer when I'm there. Now, there are times, for example, I talk to the police. I do a lot of work for the TSA. I am doing a white paper for the TSA. There's no tricks in that. When I talk to certain groups, it's not my show. It's me talking as a professor, as you oftentimes do yourself.
Right.
There are times where you say, I am not going to do any tricks in what I'm doing right now, because indeed you're demonstrating something else. All right?
Right. I certainly, when I do my workshops with healthcare systems, I'm there as a cognitive anthropologist, not as a mentalist.
Exactly. And when I talk about nonverbal communication, I just talk with the police. I've never solved the case because I don't go on cases. I do consulting for the TSA, as I say, and I write white papers. I don't care about pseudo-psychometry. That's not what it's about. It's about the knowledge that, now, through good fortune or bad fortune, I happen to be skilled in both. All right, but I know where my line is. The hard thing to do is keep newspapers understanding that fine line, that this does not belong. Now, I did 60 Minutes.
Mm-hmm. Let me speak to that for a moment. When you first appeared on 60 Minutes, because I don't own a television set, my mother called me and she said, Paul, there's this man on 60 Minutes that's amazing. And any president, any world leader, any business leader wishes that they could have this spot that this man has right now. That anyone in the world of any power wishes they could have the attention and energy that he's receiving right now. You need to see this and figure out what he's doing to be able to have had that. And because I was doing mentalism, and this was, having you on 60 Minutes was really one of the first times my family gave credit to the field of mentalism, that, gee, maybe it's something worthwhile, valuable, and important. So I'm very grateful for your ability to convert my family.
Oh, thank you. So they're no longer Mormons?
No. My father's family's Mormon, my mother's family's Jewish.
I know. Yeah, but it was, look, Mike Wallace is the Grand Inquisitor, but they weren't there to expose things that could be exposed. They were there to be entertained. And that's what people have to understand. Again, that you know, I think I manage. Well, I know I manage. I managed to get 5-star reviews in virtually every city anywhere in the world that I am. And I think it's because I have a sixth sense. What? Yes, I have a sixth sense. What? Yes, I have a sixth sense. What is it? My sense of humor. And I really think that makes the difference. I make my audience feel at home. I make them feel comfortable. There's nothing easier, as you know, than making your audience feel foolish. Now, I've done it once or twice in my life, and I regretted it as soon as the word came out of my mouth. I mean, it's like shooting fish in a barrel. You must always be on your best. And the few times I did it, they haunt me. Even if nobody else knows that I did it, I know that I did it, and I feel bad about it because it is too easy.
Do you think then, certainly Ian Rowland at the last Magic Live said, mentalism should be done with comedy, and if it's not being done with comedy, you're doing it wrong. Do you feel that way about mentalism?
Well, again, see, I think Ian forgot one other component, which as an anthropologist you're familiar with, and that's time. In other words, there was a certain time where it wasn't done with comedy. I don't know how it should be done in the future. I know how I could do it. I think David Berglas, let's take. I don't think he's a funny guy. I think he's a brilliant mentalist. There goes Ian's theory. No, I'm just saying, I think when Berglas does mentalism, it blows you away. But don't tell me you're laughing. I try to make people laugh. I'll go for the lowest form of pun. I like to have a good time, and I have a good time on stage, and I whirl around and do whatever, you know. It's a family show. Anybody could come. I don't use any blue material ever, never have. I mean, it's not intentional. It's just me. But I think one could have mystery. I'm just not a mysterious guy. I think I'm a funny guy. The one reason I don't do hypnosis is I can't ad-lib. See, hypnosis has no room for ad-libbing. Hypnosis is all about following your script. It could be funny, but you can't ad-lib. I love wordplay, as I know you do. I mean, there's a lot of similarities between us. I mean, when I first met you, indeed, I was saying that I'm a psychologist, but if you had to narrow what I do, I really feel that I'm an anthropologist. And you said, me too. Do you remember this?
Yeah.
Me. And because I think psychology is a pseudoscience. And this is coming from somebody who's been in the field for 30, 40 years. I was a director of research at Sesame Street. I worked on the effects of violence on television from Surgeon General. Do all sorts of things, and I think psychology, I think everything but the hard sciences are pseudosciences. We use scientism, we use numerology that some of us call statistics. But it just means it's one way of telling a story now, and we should realize what we are as storytellers.
They're a humanity or an art that uses numbers in order to validate.
Well, but it can validate anything. I mean, to tell a story. Is there a difference between 90% of the people or Mrs. Jones's classroom? In other words, they're both ways of telling the story. Again, I'm not a Luddite. I'm not saying let's destroy all the, well, we could destroy washing machines. But, you know, I basically think that technology is not my best friend. I think literacy is my best friend. I think anybody out there who wants to be a mentalist, what you should do is read everything. The more you know, the better a mentalist you are, not because you've increased your intuition, but you're creating a connection in your synapses of knowledge that somebody could say something that'll make a connection in you that's also making a connection in them, and suddenly you've read their mind, and you really have.
Because you have shared experience and shared...
Well, yeah, I think that's what intuition is. Intuition is a shared it's your lifetime's worth of experiences, okay, that you're working off of. That's what intuition is. And the more experiences you have, and the more knowledge you have, the more intuition you have. It's not a trick, and it's not something, I think, it's not something that's a cult. I think it's part of something normal. That's not for me, so I wouldn't worry about that.
This is an interesting thing you just stated. You said read everything.
Private caller.
Which is they're going to leave a
For you.
Which, I'm getting a call.
Private caller.
The funny thing is,
Shut up. It's okay.
The very first time I ever met Max Maven, when I was a boy, I went up to him and said to him, Max, I'm sure you have some generic piece of advice you give to every young mentalist. So I don't want to waste your time. Just tell me your generic piece of advice. And he said, read everything. And I said, read everything red, read everything blue, read everything old, read everything new. What do you mean read everything? And he said, had I felt it required more words, I would have utilized them. You're a pest, go away. That was my first Max. But I've learned over time, I think that there's great validity to what you're saying, that the more we know, the more we know. I mean, the more I know about what it is to be a rancher in Montana, the better I am at interacting in a real mind-reading way with a rancher from Montana. But the question that I want to ask from the Whole Circle Magic people is, what types of books, mentalism or not, would you advise other people who want to be you to go out on Amazon and read?
Okay, well, first of all, I think that you try not to emulate anybody. You've got to find you. Now, I happen to be a jovial psychologist who loves mentalism, so it all works, and is always curious about the mind, and I chose to field a career of mine, and I love puzzles, and you know, like someone said, I'm the avuncular guy who says, pull you my finger. I mean, you know, it's... but you had mentioned certainly perhaps one of my great heroes, Max Maven. I think you should read everything by Max. I first met Max, I don't know, 130 years ago. But when I first saw him, I knew that this is a guy who I could learn from. So of living mentalists, I think Max is probably number one. Number two is Kreskin. Now, the reason I put number two as Kreskin has nothing to do with well-knownness.
He hasn't written much. I mean, we have his How Do You Say Kreskin?
Kreskin is a brilliant adapter, but he doesn't create. I mean, I remember there was one week he was co-hosting the old Mike Douglas show, and he started bringing out marketed effect after marketed effect after marketed effect. And I said, holy cow. But the point is, his presentations were unbelievably terrific. So, but it's on a different level. So number one is Max. Number two has to be Kreskin of living, and then you know then it moves around depending on who I met that week. Of dead,
should they be reading psychology, anthropology, neurolinguistic programming?
Well, the number one anthropologist who was a psychologist who was also my professor. Well, there were two. One was a man named Ray Birdwhistle, who founded the field of nonverbal communication. He was my professor and my dissertation advisor, and he found the field in the 50s. So again, you know, the man who founded the field of nonverbal communication, the man who wrote his work was called kinesics, and his major work was kinesics in context. He was my professor, and I was one of the three students who was still out there doing the nonverbal stuff. Ackman is another one, and there are some others. And the other person academically who I would recommend that people read, so I recommend everybody read Birdwhistle. The three people I'm going to basically get to. The second one is Greg Bateson. Now, Greg Bateson was also my professor. Greg Bateson was married to Margaret Mead,
Oh, yeah.
and Catherine Bateson's dad. And his major work was called Steps to an Ecology of the Mind. Now, it sounds like today a book for every mentalist. Ooh,
Right.
a great book. Now, when I read it, I got to tell you, it was plowing it through. Now, what I found after 20, 30 years of being a professor also is a lot of this has become common sense already. It's like McLuhan was hard to understand. Today, every child understands McLuhan. I mean, without saying it, they just see it in the culture.
This makes sense.
But Bateson basically had a thought process of how the mind and how we deal with data and metadata and how we draw pictures, and he begins each chapter with what he calls a photograph, and a written photograph. So I loved and still love Greg Bateson. He was a major influence, and again, an anthropologist in his case. And I guess the third academic would be well, again, McLuhan was really good. So suddenly they all begin to pile on. I mean, I had the good fortune of working with the top minds in creativity. I was at Sesame Street, worked with Jim Henson. I had top minds in psychology, top minds in anthropology, top minds. I mean, I've had a charmed life. I'm a lucky guy.
Had great access.
Yeah, but and I worked hard, and I still work hard. I don't take any of it for granted. I have a great family. I have kids, grandkids. Been married forever, and a day. And
Well, happy anniversary today.
doing my wife, and as I say, I consider myself a very lucky guy. But inside, I am a teacher. More than a performer, I am a teacher. And I take off every so often to go back just to teach. I did it 2 semesters ago, no performing at all, just to be in the classroom again. I love knowledge. I love information. I love, and again, I love puzzles. I mean, to me, all knowledge is a puzzle, and it's putting it together. I mean, this is what we learn from anthropology. The whole idea of language. I was one of the editors of the Journal of General Semantics.
Oh, yeah.
Et cetera. Yeah. So I edited that for about 3-4 years.
Wow. Yeah, we had that in my library at my graduate college.
Yeah. I've done. I had Irving Goffman presentation of self and everyday life as my professor. I mean, that's what I mean. I had access, and I was a lucky guy. But general semantics really is mentalism. Now, while I do not have the slightest respect for neurolinguistic programming as mentalism or as anything else.
I want to hesitate here because you're okay. You call psychology a pseudoscience.
Right.
You're okay with people thinking the cause to the effect is psychology, but you're not okay with the cause to the effect being NLP.
Well, no, I'm not happy with them thinking the cause. NLP, I think, is a cult. CULT. That's the only problem. I do think psychology is a cult. But when I try to back up certain things, and again, I can't say that what I do is supernatural. I never use that term. I feel psychology is a cult. I do feel that it is a pseudoscience. Nevertheless, I think that I could get more out of psychology than I could out of NLP. I do believe, for example, body language is a real thing. Okay, I have no doubt about it. Is it 100% correct all the time? No. But when I'm training, The TSA, in ways to read people's nonverbal responses, believe me, I'm not teaching them bull. I'm teaching them something that will put statistical odds in their favor.
Give them a better shot. Now, stepping, I think a lot of what you use the body language and the psychology in this for is sort of character, theatrical flavor, scripting, adding kickers to the effects. But because we're talking here to entertainers today, and I think a lot of magicians as well as mentalists, where do you go about deciding? How do you go about deciding what magical effects or actual moments of astonishment you're going to place in your show? We have access to so many. How do you?
Questions, and I have the answer. There is nothing in my show that, under the best of all possible conditions, I couldn't do without trickery. Okay, that to me is the #1 criteria. Therefore, now that doesn't mean I could do an hour and a half without trickery. What it does mean is there's not one item in the show that, under the best possible circumstances, I could not do without trickery. So if it's picking a number, I could do that under the right circumstances and through. Look at Peter Turner; he could do it too. Under the right circumstances, yes, I could pick a liar out of a lineup. Under the right circumstances, I could read somebody if they're lying, somebody what letters they're thinking of, if they're thinking of the letters, again, looking at various things. Under certain circumstances, I could get an impression of what someone's holding behind my head in their closed hand. Blindfolded. I mean, these are not impossible things. I do it with the press all the time. Right. They come up to me afterwards, they hold something behind my head and say, well, what is this? Well, I know it's not a cow. So right away, I mean, it's got to be in their hand. And I listen for a jingle, and I listen for things. The point is, some of it is intuitive, some of it isn't. But the point is, it's not a gift, it's not a cult. I don't claim that it's a cult. But that gives me a criterion.
So you use the trickery. You use the trickery, if I'm just getting this clear. You use the trickery in order to make sure that the show the audience is paid for gets right more often, more consistently. Than
I make sure that it's a show. Well, I make sure that it's a show. I mean, somebody's not coming to see somebody experiment.
Right.
I mean, you know, I come to my classes if you want that. No, it's called a show. See, it has a playbill, it has producers, it has lighting, it has, you know, it's a show. Okay, it's reviewed by theater critics. People buy tickets. You know, so there's no confusion there.
But I like this concept that you include things in the show that are possible. I mean, Harry Lorraine didn't always use his memory techniques to memorize the things he was memorizing.
That's correct.
His tricks,
particularly when he sold it on television.
Right, but he could have used those things.
Yeah, no, and that's the point. I believe everything that I do. I think that's the other thing. In addition to sense of humor, I believe I could do those things. Not in a psychopathic way. But there's not one thing in my show, which is why, for example, I don't do psychokinesis, because I don't buy it. I don't bend metal. I don't predict the future. I don't do lots of things during my show because I don't believe them, and I don't understand how they could be done. If I can't do it on the best of all days, then it's not my show. Now, I've also created 7 or 8, depending what you consider full shows, different shows, because the New York Times won't review a show unless 70 or 80% different from your preceding show. So I had Mind Games and All That Jazz, which was a music version, Mind Games 2, Marc Salem's Out of His Mind. In England, I've had at least 5 different shows. Coming up with that much material, when all you're really doing is guiding a thought, influencing a thought, or picking up a thought, is really hard, because I do an hour and a half. I also use no cards in my show. No telekinesis, no predictions. suddenly we're talking about, yeah, I got to get by on theater craft, humor, and personality. When Mike Wallace asked me straight out, how do I do it? I told him talent.
Yeah. Bob Cassidy made a similar statement. He said, "I'm a mind reader, and so what I do in my show is I read minds, and that's all he does." And I think that you're saying that too. Primarily, what you want your show to be, you're doing mind games, and you don't do telekinesis or spoon bending or talking to the dead. You read minds.
Yeah, well, I talk to the dead; they just don't answer.
Right. Right.
It's a long distance call.
Let me go back to the full circle questions here. Could you tell us about your book, The 6 Keys to Unlock and Empower Your Mind, how that's helped you in your career, the benefit of writing a book, why did you write it, anything on that?
Yeah. It basically is a book on linguistics. If you notice, it's not under self-help on the back. It's under business. It's not under self-help. I'm a psychologist, and I've never taken a patient. I give absolutely no counseling to anybody whatsoever. People will ask me for advice, and I absolutely will turn them down. I give no advice, even as a psychologist. Never took a patient. But this book is, it's some standard stuff. I mean, it has memory in it, ways to develop more powerful memory. It has it has pendulum, which I believe in 100%. To me, it's not a cult. It is ideomotor response, and I have no problem with that. Puzzles, brain strengthening, the gamut of how our mind processes information, elements that luck plays in things, chance, how to better your chances at certain things. And I had a regular column for over 3 years in Men's Health magazine. Also called Mind Games. It was how to get a better seat on a plane, and just shtick. How to get things done. I mean,
how to make mentalism applicable.
Tricks in the sense of magic tricks, but they are the tricks of the psychologist, of the advertising man, of the and of the conjurer. I mean, my literature mentions, I use the tricks of the conjurer.
When did you begin performing?
I was probably about 10 when I began to really appreciate magic, but I appreciated immediately mentalism. I mean, magic was something that I liked, but there was something about mentalism that immediately, so I was about 10, that immediately drew me to it. And now again, my home was an academic household. My dad was a rabbi, my mom was a pharmacist. The house was always full of books, and I loved books. I devoured books. And I just think that I liked being a ham, and I liked entertaining, and I liked broad humor.
The son of a rabbi liked being a ham. Ooh.
Huh?
The son of a rabbi liked to be a ham, huh?
Yeah. That's right. Well, kosher ham.
The kosher ham.
Tofu ham.
It's an interesting question. I mean, you and I are both people of faith, right? We believe in something outside of science. How does that affect, influence, change the way you do mentalism, seeing how many mentalists and magicians, especially today, are atheist and feel that there's conflict with belief and performance?
Yeah, first of all, it's a very difficult thing to deal with, first of all, to be a person of faith and to declare it. By that I simply mean I never would discuss faith 10 years ago with the press or anything like that, because I didn't want people to say it's faith that makes him do what he does on stage. See, it is so easy for people to believe that I wanted to be cautious and make sure people understood there wasn't a touch of the spiritual in what I did on stage. All right. So I never even discussed my background, my religion, anything. I mean, there was a woman when finally it was revealed by me in Jewish Chronicle in London, and she said, "Marc Salem's Jewish. I just read that." And she said, "I would have come to your show years ago, but I thought you were an Arab." She thought the name was Salam.
Right.
I mean, it's true. I did many shows in Dubai, for example, and there they say, "Oh, you must be from the Ibn Salem family."
Yeah, I was rejected once. I was hired for a show in Dubai and then turned away
Yeah,
for being too Jewy. Uh,
yeah. Well, my wife, her passport's stamped Israeli, so I have mixed feelings about me performing in a place where she's not allowed. Um, but I did it
do you
several
have
times.
do you have a team you brainstorm with? Do you sit and meditate with books? Are you inspired by watching other mentalists or other comedians or other what is your process to create these shows?
Yeah, my process is inspiration. By that, I could be inspired by it. Like right now, I'm stuck on a problem, and it has to do with getting the right kind of shiner for an effect. And it's just consuming my mind right now. Um, and I let it consume it till it either solves itself or it doesn't solve itself. I also have to look for certain kinds of material. I mean, again, having to do hour-and-a-half shows that aren't similar to my previous shows. I mean, that's a heck of a lot of material. Fortunately, I grew older and I had kids and I had grandkids, so they become part of my story now. It's much more personally invested in my show. I tell stories about my grandkids, real stories, but they give me the framework, um, as opposed to no framework at all.
So your
Uh,
characters changed and developed with you because there are a lot of magicians and singers and entertainers that once they create their character, that character stays in stasis at age 23, even when they're 60.
Yeah, you see, but I learn constantly, and that's why I talk about my grandkid, and we would hide this, and suddenly it becomes more real, and I could tell real jokes about them, and sometimes they're in the audience, and yeah, it's great. Um, so yes, I take things from real life. I certainly adapt things. Um, I take old ideas. I mean, me and my friend Richard Mark, who's a psychiatrist, we're a good team, and we're creating some things, together. I'm a member of the 13 in New York, and that's a group of mentalists, and we,
How many of you are there?
it depends who's alive that month. There should be 13 in state.
Mhm.
I don't know what state that happens to be. Um, and then I'm a member of the PEA, which I think is a marvelous, marvelous, marvelous organization. But I don't get involved politically with any magic group or organization. I mean, I hold no office in anything, because that doesn't interest me. I want to schmooze, and I want to play, and I want to talk, and I want to sometimes rest as age goes on. Um, but there's thrills. I mean, look, my first trip to England was a thrill. Edinburgh was a thrill. Meeting David Berglis the first time was a thrill. I mean, look, I was a kid and still, my first SAM convention, Fogel was appearing.
Oh,
Um,
Maurice Vogel was appearing. That's
yes, so I
fabulous.
went up to him and I introduced myself. I said, "Hi, I'm Moshe," and he said, "That's my name too."
Yeah, you're right, right.
And he let me set up his dishes for the rifle thing. And as time goes on, I became very good friends with his son-in-law, Chris Woodward, and his daughter, Nadine. And I know the
Chris
grandkids
is very cool.
now. His brothers come to the show. I mean, I'm friends with the whole family. Now, when I grew up, the Brits were the most important mentalists. In many ways, they still are. The names that I read were all from, even like Ali Bongo. He came up with great mentalism. I mean, I wasn't, Berglis and, the name Corinda. I mean, they were all Brits.
Right.
Okay, there was nobody other than Max, but again, he was very young at that time, who I could look on. So to me, the British, I mean, confabulation, the original confabulation, came from Britain, and
But the
you know,
American Dunninger didn't inspire you.
Yes, the American Dunninger did inspire me, but that was a little before my time, and I didn't see the kinescopes till later.
Right.
So, no, Kreskin was far more inspiring to me than Dunninger.
Yet
Um,
Kreskin, I think, was highly influenced by Dunninger. I
of,
think
of course.
you're seeing some Dunninger and Kreskin.
Oh, of course, they didn't speak to each other. I mean, they had many massive battles, which make today's battles between mentalists look like child's play. I think that there is too much rancor out there. I was told by Brooks, who head of the Magic Cafe, that the most contentious section is the mentalist section there. I mean, either mentalists have too big egos or too little egos, or too thin-skinned or too thick-skinned, or they think that they know everything, or they think they know nothing. But the point is that there are a lot of bitter mentalists out there.
I think, and this is me stabbing it, I think mentalists are intellectual, shy individuals who like to sit and read books. I think that if we were better at team building and community, we'd go out and have assistants and illusions and all of that. But mentalists find I'm going to be alone on the road with my bag very appealing.
But I think there's also something to the mental challenge of mentalism. I would much prefer to do a magic square or a rapid addition for an audience than make something appear or disappear. I mean, I just would rather do that. It is more stimulating to me.
Because of the reality TV aspect that you said earlier.
Well, but even before I had thought of that, I mean, it's just exciting. That's what I mean. When I was a kid, I used to, you know, Garner I used to like, and mathematics, magic, and whatever the first book was, and I mean, I loved
Yes,
all.
mathematical circus and his.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I remember those books.
Martin Gardner stuff.
Yeah.
But I loved all of that stuff. I loved anything with numbers, with a puzzle, something to be solved. I mean, the early Hummer stuff blew me away. You know, I think it's a different kind of puzzle than a box puzzle. Box puzzles never excited me. That is what a lot of illusions are. I also think, as I say, there is far more room, I think, for your. I'm not a good actor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's more room for your own personality to come through in mentalism, because that's all you got.
That's what you got. That's what people come to see.
That's it.
So another
you're saying it's the loner, but when you think about it, you're out there, man. You by yourself. You don't have 6 leggy assistants, 4 boxes, 19 lights, and it's you versus the audience in a battle of wits, and in a battle of wit. I enjoy that. To me, it's a lot like teaching. I am in front of a classroom, and I say the same thing that I say to myself before show. I wonder what they got for me today.
I was cast in Phantom of the Opera, and right before I became a full-time mentalist. And I decided one of the reasons I left acting in musical theater was because if something bothered me in the news, in a musical theater show, I can't stop the show and have a conversation with the audience. If something funny happened in my day-to-day life, I can't stop the show and incorporate that into the show, or the political message I care about. But in mentalism, you have that power to take whatever charmed you that week or whatever distressed you that week and turn it into part of your art.
Well, a great professor who I had was a man named Irving Goffman. Goffman's well known in sociology circles as the man who created the dramaturgical model of the human being. That is, we wear many masks, but they make us up. It's not as if you're an avocado, you peel it off and you have a real core, but each mask is you. And his major work was the presentation of self in everyday life. He talks about a front stage and a backstage, what we expose to people, how television suddenly has made the backstage of people the front stage. He was very, very influential in my thinking and a lot of people's thinking. He was also nuts. He shot his wife. He had 16
Oh,
wives. He would go to cocktail parties and take notes in people's discussions. But a genius. Irving Goffman, and I wrote his obituary. But I think this idea of the presentation of self is a very fascinating one. How much do we reveal of ourselves is very much the question that you're asking. How much do we reveal of our real selves on stage? Is there a backstage that we save just for certain people? How far? No, I felt I've gone further backstage as the years go on. As I said, I think once it was a lot of artifice. As time goes on, I reveal more of myself. And I think young performers, the audience doesn't want to hear your story, frankly. It's probably not that interesting. You're 18, your audience is 40. They don't really care about your life unless you really have a great one, like you were found by chimpanzees and raised in, the bush, and by the time you were 9, you had killed a lion with your bare hands, and then,
David Crockett, The Jungle Book, and Nature Boy all in one.
And Tarzan.
Tarzan, right?
But I think that's part of the reason why mentalists are so contentious. I think because they think that they buy their publicity. They think they're masterminds. And I think they have easily bruised egos, like many performers do. But I think mentalists are thin-skinned. And they do lash out. Now, again, I happen to know mentalists who just are the salt of the earth, and they're just wonderful, wonderful, wonderful people. But that is in specific. In general, I think a lot of mentalists are just bad people.
Wow, that's a bold statement.
What?
That's a bold statement.
Okay, then I take it back. The other thing I do is I could change my mind anytime I want. I have that. Well, what I mean by bad people, I think there's very few altruistic mentalists. So let me, instead of saying bad, say non-altruistic.
Right. So that leads into a full circle magic question. Is were you ever mentored by any mentalists? And have you ever mentored any mentalists?
No and no. Even that responsibility I don't want. As with being a psychologist, I'll give advice. I'll give my idea of something, but I don't know how to tell someone something's crummy or something's good, and do it this way, do it my way. In fact, I shy away from do it my way. I just don't think. One reason, again, I didn't go into the clergy was I don't want to tell people how to live their lives or do it my way, and that's why I don't carry the occult off the stage, and I don't do a billion other things, because the influence factor. I care about my family, look, I give to the poor, and I'm a good person, I think, but it's no, I don't have the gene. I'd rather teach people to appreciate good stuff than teach them good stuff. When I do get letters, I do get a lot of letters. Basically, my response is read. Now, again, you were saying read what? So I'm saying you could read the classical mentalists if you're interested in mentalism. Read the Bible just for the mythic qualities. Nobody's asking you to believe in anything, but knowing the Bible, knowing your Shakespeare, knowing geography, knowing mathematics, knowing statistics, knowing science, knowing. I mean, these are things you once you know them. First of all, your life is better. I don't think knowledge is a bad thing. Um, Second, you could win on Jeopardy.
Right.
And the third is you will be quicker on your feet with responses to the audience. You'll be able to make connections. Now, I think that's what real genius is making connections. There was a show by a man named Burke. It was a TV show, and then he later did it as a book, and then later on called Connections. And it literally followed the evolution of things from things you never thought that they would came from. So how, for example, well, one of my mentors, did the same thing with childhood. He connects the printing press to the creation of childhood. There was no such thing as childhood before the printing press. And the printing press brought about a need to learn to read, and the reading brought about the need for classifications in schools, and suddenly literacy, and suddenly the whole idea of education came about because of the printing press. And he makes a wonderful argument, and he talks about how TV brings about what he calls the disappearance of childhood. Because nowadays nobody has to read any longer, and that was a Postman who also wrote a famous book. It'll come to me in a second, because he wrote two contrary books, which is fine because you're allowed to do that. New York Times jumped on him for doing that. One was called Teaching as a Subversive Activity, and the other was Teaching as a Conserving Activity. So the New York Times said, how could you write teaching as a conserving activity and teaching as a, and he said, well, because that's what it's about. It's about you can change your mind. Once it's written down, it doesn't mean you can't change your mind. He was on the Today Show talking about this disappearance childhood, and the host asked him, then he said, Professor Postman, what's your book about? And he said, that's what it's about. It's about television expecting me to give you a discourse in 3 minutes of a book that's going to take you 8 hours to read. I can't tell you what the book's about. You got to read the book. That's why I wrote it.
And I like that you say you can change your mind even if you've written it down. I mean, Dr. Bob Neal, who wrote The Magic with Eugene Berger, he had a great book he wrote as a boy, well, not a boy, but a young man, called In Praise of Play, and on the theories of play. And I read it, and I found it very inspirational, and I brought it to him and said, this really spoke to my core. And he said, oh, that's nonsense. I don't believe any of that anymore.
Well, it's great. But that's what I meant by it depends what age. We said earlier, when Cassidy said that the quote you gave to Cassidy.
That mentalists should read minds.
Yeah, that it depends on an age. I mean, Dunninger could do anything. I mean, who cared? And Kreskin does magic tricks at times.
How do you feel about mixing magic tricks with mentalism for yourself?
It doesn't work for me. It doesn't work for me. I mean, again, to me, it's not the storyline. It's like beginning with juggling, which, frankly, I mean, Tim Conover at one point would take a crystal ball, take it out, throw it in there, and it would be a different color when he caught it.
Right, and John Archer in the UK, he ends by playing the ukulele. And
linking finger rings was Koran's opening.
Right. So there's lots of that going on,
yeah, but I have enough material that I have enough trouble getting all the mentalism in. I'm not going to start also getting, one reason I don't do card stuff isn't because magicians do card stuff. I don't do card stuff because there are so many choices. This gives me an entire area I don't even have to think about, because I think there is brilliant card stuff out there.
Gary Darwin in Las Vegas, who runs the Gary Darwin Magic Club and has for this year, I think, is his 50th year of every Wednesday night. He has one of the most impressive magic libraries I've ever seen, and he said to me, I buy every book in magic ever published except for card magic. because there's too much on card magic.
Yeah, yeah, there is. I mean, I think, like in my fourth show, whatever that's called, Mind Games and all, whatever, that one I do a memorized deck. It's the only cards I use in any of my 7 or 8 shows. One of my shows is a musical. It's Mind Games and all that jazz. And it has a jazz, an all-woman jazz band called The Vibrations, and the audience thinks of songs and they play them. And it's a nightclub show, although we did it in the theater in Florida. But I was the only mentalist ever to perform at the Plaza. And we ran there for a good 4 months, which is longer than anybody else had run there. And that was called Mind Games and all that jazz.
Mm-hmm.
So my shows kept the Mind Games moniker until recently, when now it's localized. So it's Mind Over Manhattan, Mind Over Miami, Mind Over Milwaukee. It'll be in Munster, Illinois. It'll be Mind Over Munster. Now, it doesn't have to begin with an M. It just, I did Mind Over Rochester.
Are you involved in the Mind Games TV show on National Geographic?
No. But it's a great series.
So let me talk for a minute about business, if you're willing to share anything. What's the journey for business? Is it find agents, find managers, find producers, go to fringe festivals, be on the phone 8 hours a day? For you, what is it, targeting a certain theater? What is the journey of business of mentalism?
Again, talk about luck. People don't like hearing this because, again, like Wiseman's written, how we make our own luck. He's a great magician also from Edinburgh. I think we do make our own luck. We got to think positive about things. It's not a supernatural thing. It's just, you got to have many pokers in the fire. And you find your own way. I never said no. I would volunteer. I would perform everywhere. Price was never an issue. Until I built and built and built and built. And I didn't even have a brochure. All I would do was I would insist whoever it was send me a letter. And then I got those letters and I put them all on nice, different colored linen paper, like stationery. And then those were bound together and sent to other corporations. And so it began, that way. There was very little, new media at that time, what we call new media, but I was getting a lot of television appearances. Today, the strategies I still think is to be seen and be noticed. Look, it gets harder and harder. Once upon a time, you could be on the Tonight Show once, and the next day you're nationally known. Today, you could be on Tonight Show 1,500 times and no one will still know who you are. So you've got to be out there, probably with a smaller audience. But now, people like Jerry McCambridge always wanted Vegas, and he got Vegas. Okay, so that was his aim. I think my aim was the sophistication of a Broadway theater on that level. So it was staying in New York, and because I love theater, again, it had an intellectual side to it that I loved. Again, Arthur Miller came to every single one of my opening nights. Before he died, I said, Arthur, I just want one quote for you. Mind games, more fun than death of a salesman.
He didn't give you that, did he?
No, I didn't give you that one. But it's funny, the night he came was the night Mike Wallace first saw the show. But, yeah, I get a lot of stars, a lot of intellectuals, a lot of playwrights coming to the show. And I don't play down to kids either. It's a family show, but briefly I did stuff special for kids in the audience, and I dropped my Wednesday matinees, even if it meant doing 2 on Sunday. Because I wasn't going to. Wednesday matinees are elderly people who want to watch something. My show is definitely involved. There's not 10 seconds of the show that doesn't involve the audience. I mean, there's no passive viewing time in the show, and I think that's important too. The knowing how to fill space and time is very, very important. And again, I think being a professor helped me do that. See, I'm not quite sure which skills helped me the more. Being a professor helped me entertain more, entertaining helped me be a professor better. Probably a little of each. One of a famous experiment is that a professor, the class did it on the professor. Whenever he came to one side, they all went like this, they nodded, and when he walked to the other side of the class, they ignored him. Until finally he was giving the whole lecture from that side of the street, and he didn't even realize that this was operant conditioning going on him.
This happened to me at the University of Nevada, Las Vegas when I was teaching, and the class got me to stand in the trash can.
Yeah.
I was so tuned in to trying to interact with them, and I didn't understand it, but I started to teach the whole class from one corner of the room where the trash can was. And then they laughed and they told me what they were doing, and so I was very influenced.
Oh yeah. I mean, I want my theater lights on at least 50% of light. I don't want, because I want to be able to see my audience. That feedback loop is really important to me. I mean, I want to see when they're interested and when they're not interested, and when they're looking at each other and when they're not looking at each other. I mean, that's 50%. I can't stand on the stage and do a show. It's not a play. It's theater. And the other thing is, it's the kind of theater where technique has to be invisible. Once again, it gets back to spontaneity. I have to look like this the first time I'm doing this. If it looks like I did this last night, I blow the illusion. Now, they knew I did it last night, and I've been running here for 8 months. But if I look like I did it last night, if suddenly, again, light comes on, I walk into a pool of light, that's no good. The music reaches crescendo. Could you imagine Uri Geller bending a spoon? Suddenly the lights go low. Spotlight comes on the spoon. Weird music begins, and then the spoon begins to bend. You'd say it's a great trick, but you know, it will lack theatricality because of the theatricality.
For a short time, Jerry McCambridge had a show at the Stardust in Vegas, and he opened the show with a elevator illusion, where, you know, the elevator, he came down and then he appeared out of the elevator, and that was that changed the whole energy and tempo of the rest of the show for the audience to do that.
Oh yeah.
So that didn't last in the later shows.
Yeah. No, I think you got to be honest to your own persona too. I think that for anybody who wants to go into any of the performing arts, you got to know who you are, and that's sometimes easy. It was kind of easy for me, even though I keep learning. Others keep searching it out. We're always imitative of some other people a little bit at first, but ultimately you find yourself, and that becomes your character. Now, I have a friend who wanted to be the Sherlock Holmes of thought.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he happens to be a brilliant businessman. And to this day, I can't convince him to use the business persona as his stage persona, as opposed to this Sherlock Holmes of thought. Other people, it works for because they're tweedy kind of people. Tweed, not
right.
Tweed. But he wasn't. He looked like tweed. And I say, whatever you do, that should be your persona, because then you don't have to lie. Then you don't have to. There's a friend of mine in Europe who works in the travel business. I said, that you should circle everything around travel.
Well, that's what made Jason Alexander's mentalism show so good. I mean, he started with the core truth of who he was, and he tied every piece of mentalism into actionable skills that he learned to help him as an actor.
Right. I think that is the only way to do it, or you've got to be a great actor. I find it easier not have to remember things and just to be me. Um, I'm probably a little funnier on stage, and but other than that, it's me.
So
The
how
guy up there is me.
But how do you sell this? I mean, so often when I go to an audition for a variety show, they'll say, okay, juggler, go out and juggle, and magician, come out and do your magic, and singer, come out and sing. Now, mentalist, come out and do your mentalism. And I have to say to them, look, what's great about a mentalist is we're fast on our feet and fearless, but if I don't have other people with me, I can't do it. And they say, well, just pretend you have other people with you. I said, well, it doesn't work that way. So I mean, one of the problems that mentalists face is there isn't a PhD for mentalism. There isn't a Yale or Brown of mentalism. And so,
And there aren't comedy clubs anymore either.
right.
Work out, and I used to be a Catch Rising Star, and I'd be there with Jimmy Walker and Seinfeld and everybody, and I was very good friends with Andy Kaufman.
So how do you sell this? How do you, now you have reviews and things now, but how do you sell it?
All right. I think, first of all, you have to make sure you have material. Go to showcases and invite people to the showcases. You can't sell it one-on-one. I remember a terrible time I was trying to sell something one-on-one to some agent, and I go into his office and I do something, and he says, I lived through the Holocaust. I've seen those stranger things. Get out. I mean, I'm serious. I mean, it's hard to impress one person. We got to give a lot of credit to David Blaine. I mean, he did it. He went in, and I don't remember what it was, Invisible Pack, I think, but he sold.
David Blaine did the ambitious card routine.
Okay, but he sold the series on the basis of that, one-on-one. Someone saw something in him which nobody else had. And nobody else will have, For example, I mean, right now, and I don't mean to disparage anybody, but what's with tattoos?
Luke Germain. We got Luke Germain covered in tattoos.
We've got 20 mentalists with tattoos. I spoke to a group out in London a few weeks ago, and I said, hey, I am part of you. This tie is tattooed on my chest. No, I mean, there's a lot of tattoos out there. First of all, I think that hurts your corporate work, if you're doing any corporate work. I mean, you have to think about, again, what do you want to personify? I mean, I always, like you, except mine were always dark, did stage performance and everything in the three-piece. Always right. Three-piece. Lecturing, sometimes I'd be a little messier, but certainly stage performance, always a three-piece. So your appearance, I think as time continues to go on, there's no place to be bad. And a lot of mentalists think they're going to make it by doing a great YouTube. Nobody believes YouTube. I mean, come on. I've seen people fly on YouTube.
Make a stack of cards turn into an animate monster.
But what you have to do is find the showcases. I'm afraid that America Got Talent is very big, but I'm not quite sure. I know Diddleman. I'm not quite sure overnight Diddleman got anything from that. Elan had the TV series. I don't think anything came out overnight after that. Again, we live in a culture where nothing is older than yesterday. Okay? There's always the next big thing, and it's, So it is plotting, Plodding. And you just have to have your name out there. Now, how do you get your name out there? Well, I mentioned before, I mean, you volunteer, you're seen at the right places, you do charity functions, you get on the society pages. Again, I don't care about the science page. I do care about the society page. I mean, if so-and-so, it appears. I mean, you've done quite a few of those things. I mean, a big breakthrough for me was, frankly, what's that? There was a magazine, probably still does exist. It's a women's glamour magazine. I don't know, but
I think one of the things you're saying here is you have to be in the right place at the right time, and how do you do that? By being in right places all the time.
by
You
having many pokers in the fire. In other words, you don't know what the right place is. Therefore, you've got to do many things. I mean, I write articles for Men's Health. I have a regular column there, and I also did stuff for Oprah. And then I did for her magazine. Then I had a regular thing, and then I'd be teaching over here, and I'd write over here, and I'd perform over here.
But you're not going to sell your show on YouTube and the Magic Cafe and Facebook.
Sell it in the sense of here's a piece of performance.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I've done 2 TV specials. I'm not happy with either one. They just don't have the depth and dimensionality that live theater has. Again, I just think that you do what you do best. But I do think being known, and I do think that there are enough venues, you know, to try your best. Now, again, don't invite everybody, all the great people, to your first night there, because you may not be that good.
Right.
You've blown your chance for a while. You know, there was a guy who called me a few weeks ago, and he wants me to write, you know, liner notes, whatever you would call it, approbations,
Right.
for him. And I said, but I've never seen your show. So he said, well, I have stuff on YouTube. So I say, and? You know, so do a million other people. Invite me to a show and let me see what you do. I'm still waiting for the invitation.
You said that Jerry wanted to have a show in Vegas, and you're right, and that you wanted to have shows in Broadway and the West End and the Sydney Opera House because that was the audience you wanted to perform for. I personally want to travel. My whole thing is I want to be in different cities all the time, see everywhere. One of the questions we have here, I think, is from the Full Circle Magic from Kevin Potter. He said, what do you do if you want to go and perform in Japan or China or somewhere where you don't speak the language? What mentalism can you perform if you don't have shared language?
I perform in a lot of countries where they don't speak the language. I was in Scotland. No, the fact of the matter is, when I was in Spain, I had a translator.
And how did you get Anthony Blake to do that? I mean, he's a big star.
Well, he's a good friend. No, but I did several times in Spain. One time it was with Blake. He did translation, but his wife told me that he screwed up the translations, so I have no idea what he was saying. But I've done full shows. In Brazil, I did São Paulo and whatever. And in the many times I've been there, they always have a headphone interpreter behind a glass booth. Now, I don't think my puns and my sides get through all the time, but for the most part, it was fine for them. You know, it was fine for everything. I didn't like it because conceptually it bothers me for mentalism for headphones and all that sort of thing, which is why I don't use one of those mics ever.
The Countryman microphones, right? I also use.
Of course, people think you're getting information from the headpiece and that sort of thing.
I always use a lavalier for that same reason.
Yeah.
For the first time ever the other day at the Magic Castle of all places, I went up and said, no, I don't have any devices in my ears, nothing that can give me, and a girl gave me a wet willy in my ear, licked her finger and stuck it in my ear. Never had that happen before. What a horrible.
Shocking. Shocking. So I think that in other countries I try as much as possible to choose people who speak English and do things that are visual or that call for a yes or a no kind of responses, and you try to find things. Now, I don't think that I could do an hour and a half of a silent mental show.
Right.
I've played with the idea, and I don't think it will work.
Even the great silent mentalists like Aaron Crow doesn't do an hour and a half.
No, right? Yeah, I threw. You could do shadows for an hour and a half.
Right.
But so I throw that out as a challenge for sure. But I don't think that it's essential. What you have to do is have, and again, I've been in some countries in the world where there's one person who just has to do simultaneous translation. It's not ideal, but it's done. But the headphone with the real translator in the booth, like they do at the UN, was very effective. I was in Russia, but I did the whole show in English, and they told me everybody understands English. And I think, again, a bad pun or something like that may not go across, but it's okay. There's another one following it right away. I was in Israel, and my Hebrew's okay, but not great. And I did like Hebrew English.
Boker Tov, Ani Moshe.
Well, I tried to make Hebrew puns also.
Oh.
And my wife thought it was adorable. No, but it worked out well. Because I couldn't avoid puns, even if they don't cross languages.
You'd work well in Japan if you'd just learned the language.
That's right.
They love.
I have China on my list for next year. Did a run in Singapore twice at the Esplanade, which is their like their opera house.
I played in Macau, and I had a hard time. I incorporated more visual magic into my show because I just looked at it and said, "Gee, my show isn't playing here in Macau." So you're a braver man than I.
Well, I did it in McAllen, Texas, and didn't understand me either. No, I get it. You talk too fast a lot. Because it's a New Yorker thing, and I do slow down. I try to do, once again, that's keeping your eye on the audience and making sure that they're understanding. So that becomes that feedback loop that's absolutely essential for what we do. I mean, remember, we're not performing to a wall. We're performing to people who we want to respond in a certain way, and we have to look at those responses. And you're not going to have them all come. Now, I do theaters that have, 3 tiers up. So I have to make sure I have enough material that if I call someone from the top tier, either it's something I could yell up and they yell back and it's done on stage, or if I take like 5 people, the first person comes from up there, and the theater ushers already know they have to usher that person down, and as they're on their way down, then I get the other people from the audience. But I also make lines like, "Quick, now throw down her purse." I mean, there's just, I play.
You've built all these shows. Is there a core structure that you have for how to build the show?
Yeah, I think that mentalism begins with something unlike the classics of, like, the Fitzky. Start with something big, then down, big, down, plateau, big. I think mentalism has to go straight up diagonally. You begin with something understandable, that the audience could understand, in fact, almost how you did it, and could almost say, if I learned, I could do that too. Now, for many years, I did memorizing the newspaper, which used real memory of the newspaper. I mean, it wasn't a trick. It was memorizing newspaper, It was hard, and after a while, one night, I was just too tired to do it, so I did the Magic Square. Mm-hmm. Well, the Magic Square was such a hit that I brought it back, and it was, now everybody does it. It was John Archer who said that he'd never seen a Magic Square till I had done it, and then suddenly he realized the potential of it for mentalism, but it hadn't been used for 40 years till I dusted it off.
Well, the Magic Square is kind of a horrible effect until you did it. It was because you knew how to build the energy and to get continuously bigger and how to make it larger. Prior to that,
but it's also, but that aside, it was chosen because it's understandable. Okay, people say I could learn that algorithm, whatever, and do that.
Right. Absolutely.
So whatever it is, I begin the show with something understandable. The second thing that I do usually involves something that they also understand, but involves a choice the audience makes. So the first thing I could basically do from stage, be it memory of the newspaper, throw out pages of the paper, they call it the page number, I tell them what's on, one person's on the stage, and okay. Next thing, several people on stage, usually some sort of something that they would understand too. So I draw from the literature of advertising, and it could be something, a bank night kind of routine, or choices of things, or different cups with different things in them, or bags, or, I mean, the point is that they understand, yes, I'm constantly manipulated by advertisers, this is possible, it's fine. So that's usually the second structural thing, and that goes up over. The third thing I usually do is a signature piece is the Five Liars, pseudo-psychometry, but that still makes sense to people, and I talk about real nonverbal communication there, because I, in fact, could do that piece 80% of the time without any gimmickry at all, okay? My greatest trick, in fact, is to turn around, hand it, and see who reaches for it. And I went, no, there you go, it just gave away. In other words, the drawings.
Just to catch up, you start with something believable on stage, you then go into the audience with something for them, you then go into something in the world of advertising, then you have a teaching moment.
Yeah, but it's still, understandable. Everybody still says, I could do that, and they begin to play with it, too, themselves. They're playing the game with us. All right. Then after that, I will probably begin to move it a little, because that becomes a turning point in the show. The Five Liars, or anything that involves the nonverbal elements, because now they kind of think they understand it. All right. Then I'll move to something along the line of a newspaper test, a book test, something along those lines.
Something that they say, whoa.
And again, but using somewhat of a nonverbal pattern, or for real nonverbal. And even get things wrong, different variations. Then I'll usually move into something that would be a confabulation. And the confabulation, my subtext in all my confabulations is I am influencing the audience to make these choices. I can't predict the future. Remember, Marc Salem cannot predict the future. Therefore, the best I could do is guide them to make certain selections.
Like Chan Canasta, my only power is to control your actions.
Mm-hmm. Yes, but I don't steal lines. So that would be a confabulation effect. Any effect that we would call a prediction effect, I twist it so it becomes an influencing kind of effect. Again, not similar to the second piece, which is also an advertising parallel, but here the odds are much more against me. There it's just 3 envelopes. Here now I'm dealing with a larger number of things. So again, it follows the logic of making it more and more difficult. Again, don't do the mental epic kind of thing where I guess your name, and then I'll say your address, and now pick a card. I mean, that doesn't work, okay?
Think anything in the world. Think anything in the universe. Yeah. Now think heads or tails.
Yeah, right. I mean, so make sure your show takes that same route. At this point, I may again demonstrate something that makes some sense and is strong. I may do a memorized deck, or I may do rapid memory with the audience. Something again that mathematics, something cool. I've done the Knights move.
Oh, the Knights tour, yeah, the Knights.
Yeah. Your Manor has a wonderful one that we project on the screen, and I did that one season, and that's very, very difficult.
I was there with when Peter Ravine passed that over to his son, and his son did it for the first time on stage.
Yeah, it's hard. It ain't no piece of cake.
Right.
But that's the point. Again, keep things within the realm of possibility. Then I'd move on from there into something that Well, again, it could have an element of loss somebody's cell phone in one of the bags. The audience calls out a number of a bag or something like that, and it's stomped on. Um,
Something
and
applicable.
What's that?
Something applicable, something that they
Yeah,
wish
yeah, yeah,
they could do.
yeah. And at this point, people are still, I mean, they're
At this point, you're an amazing man, but you're
well.
not
At
yet
this
a
point, they
magician.
stop trying to solve it.
Right.
That's the thing. I mean, with the rapid pattern, the silly jokes, and all the action that's going on between things. Again, I'm just talking about structurally, and I close with some sort of Q&A.
Blindfold or not blindfold?
I use sometimes blindfold, sometimes I use the burling hole method, sometimes Dunninger method. I mean, it really depends, what the venue is. I've used them all, and I'm happy with them all. And I gotta remember that there are people who've been there the night before, and the night before, because I get a lot of return audiences, and they then bring their family the next day, which is why I can't rely on things like a patio force for
Right,
something,
right.
or
Or always being rose, or always being red, or always
yeah,
being
but
stuff.
because the next night it'll be different, and they'll say, well, why last night did you take the 2 envelopes, and tonight you gave out the 2 envelopes they picked? So I can't use anything that can't be repeated,
Right.
and that is another restraint that I have, but it's a good one. I mean, I like having the constraints because they tell me what I could do and what I can't do.
You and I have talked for over 90 minutes, and I'm so grateful. I want to wrap up if I can, but know that this video is going on YouTube, and it's going into the history of magicians, and someday, long after we're dead, people are going to be able to pull this up and watch it
I'm
to
not going.
understand.
I'm not
What?
going. But the main thing is read,
Right.
learn, read and learn, and try not to steal, and keep a secret. Everybody, shh. Keep a
Oh,
secret.
Marc Salem, it's so good to have you. Where can
Good to
they
see
go
you,
to
buddy.
find out more about you? If people want to find out more about you, learn more about you and what you do, where should they go?
They should write to you. Okay, that's Paul Draper. They could find me wherever they want to find me. I'm not hard to find. I arrested it like dozens of times. No, marksalem.com.
Any last words, and then we'll stop the broadcast?
Yes, it's always a secret, and learn to keep a secret. If there's anything that I feel uncomfortable about in our world today, is how little value we're putting on our secrets. And throughout history, our secrets meant something, and we should value our secrets. Because they're secrets of entertainment. They're not secrets of deception. But you kill some of the entertainment when you reveal things. So keep a secret.
Very powerful. Thank you so much from me and from Full Circle Magic, and I look forward to chatting with you more and seeing your shows
Thanks,
again.
Circle. Thanks, everybody. I'll talk to you later. I'll call you.
Bye.
Okay.